In this video, we're going to examine the cross-examination of Lucy Letby in relation to Child H, which of course involves prosecuting barrister Nick Johnson. So before we go into that, let's just establish a few facts. Child H was a case on which Lucy Letby was not found guilty, and it's very obviously the case that the pneumothorax or collapsed lung was significant in the collapse of this infant, as you would expect. What Dr. Evans has suggested in relation to this infant is wholly laughable, in fact. Now, in the entire cross-examination of Lucy Letby by Nick Johnson, he mentions the pneumothorax once. And he also asked Lucy here, so that I can understand, we can all understand what you are suggesting. What are you suggesting was the problem? And Lucy said that potentially baby H's pneumothoraces were not treated appropriately. So here's the opinion of the expert panel. Tension pneumothorax is life-threatening and should be drained immediately. If done promptly and properly, recovery is quick. Unfortunately, that did not happen. There were repeated and lengthy delays in diagnosis and treatment for the tension pneumothorax, and poor placement of chest tubes with ineffectual removal of air in the chest, resulting in reaccumulation of air in the chest and continuing clinical deterioration. In response, high ventilation pressures were used in an attempt to ventilate the infant, but this worsened the situation because excessive pressures compromised venous return to the heart and further impaired circulation and oxygenation. Child H was subjected to multiple invasive procedures, including at least 6 intubations, 7 chest needles, 3 chest drains, and multiple handbagging episodes, and prolonged period of illness. So the prosecution case for this infant is farcical, and we can say that at least Lucy Letby wasn't found guilty for this infant. But it's interesting to go over this because we should see, considering that Lucy was found guilty for other infants, that this is qualitatively worse than for other infants. But really, it's just the same thing we've seen before. I've recently gone over some of Dr. Evans in relation to Child P. You won't see anything worse here than you did in relation to Child P. That just reflects the standard of science, the standard of medical information that is used in the trial as a whole. So here on Wednesday, the 24th of May 2023, we have our favourite prosecutor, Nick Johnson KC, beginning to cross-examine Lucy Letby. Mr. Johnson begins. Well, let's move on to the case of baby H, please. If we take that picture down, Mr. Murphy, thank you. Do you remember baby H? Yes. Very memorable, wasn't she? Yes. Because of the chest drains? Yes. You know, don't you, that we make 2 allegations of attempted murder against you? Yes. Counts 10 and 11, which relate to 2 episodes of cardiac arrest in the early hours of the 26th and 27th of September? Yes. Do you have a memory of baby H independently of the notes? Yes, some. You remembered one particular detail, didn't you, that someone had to courier chest drains from the Liverpool, from Arrow Park, I think it was, you said. Yes, after the event, not on the night of baby H's collapse. Is that a reflection of how good your memory is that you can remember little details like that? Yes, it was discussed widely on the unit that it was not acceptable and we needed to get some couriered in, yes. Did you datex that? I can't recall. I'd have to check. You had one of the handover sheets for baby H, didn't you, under your bed? Yes. And you told the jury on the 15th of May that you didn't know it was under your bed. No, that's not true, is it? Yes, it is. So, I mean, this is the kind of usual prosecutor's trick. Of course, we've seen this throughout. He's going to try and make out that she's unreliable because there's no real evidence to support any of the allegations in relation to Child H, and Child H was very obviously suffering with this tension pneumothorax that even Johnson acknowledges once. One day we'll look at what Evans had to say about this infant, but there's so many other things to go through that I don't know when that will be exactly. So Johnson continues. Another thing that you said in answer to questions from your counsel, and if we could just put this up please, is in the baby H sequence and it's tile 309. Do you remember this one to Yvonne Griffiths? Really nice to hear, as I gather you are aware of some of the not so positive comments that have been made recently regarding my role, which I have found quite upsetting. Do you remember that? Yes. Do you remember what it was you told the jury that lay behind that? It was in relation to myself and Shelley Tomlins, who were newly QIS trained, having babies like baby H. Yes, I think the way you put it on the 15th of May was, some of the existing staff were not overly happy with people like myself and Shelley Tomlins having babies in Nursery 1. Yes. Who? I can't recall specifics, but it was a general conversation with certain Band 6s at that time. Which Band 6s? I can't recall specifically who. Are you not naming names in case they will contradict you? No. I think you also said that this bad feeling, if that's the right way of putting it, that's my word, not yours. Okay, I'll use that phrase. This bad feeling stopped after this point. Is that right? I recall this was specifically in regards to baby H. Yes. So again, it's my word, so I'll take responsibility for it, but any bad feeling from the Band 6s was simply related to baby H, was it? No. There was some general concern, but this that I'm talking about here is specific to baby H, yes. Let's just look at who the Band 6s were, who were on if we can. Let's go to tile 177, please. This is the first time that baby H collapsed this shift, yes. So before we go any further, of course this is just all total nonsense. There's nothing to do with this infant or the collapse of this infant. This is just kind of engaging in smear tactics against Lucy. It's once again trying to suggest that she's a liar, trying to suggest that she's fabricating various events that occurred on the unit and so forth, because they have nothing of any solidity for this infant, firstly, and then secondly, you have to completely ignore the clinical signs of the infant in order to suggest that Lucy harmed the infant. But of course, they do that through all the cases. I think it's illustrative, and the reason I'm looking at this case today is because, as I say, this is no better or worse than what they do for any of the other infants. You won't see any particular difference in this. It's the same themes, it's the same stuff we've seen before. It's just that for this one, for some reason the jury decided that Lucy shouldn't be found guilty. Let's just look at who the Band 6s were, who were on, if we can. If we go to tile 177, please. This is the first time baby H collapsed this shift, yes. It's not Nurse A, is it? She's your mate. No, I'm not talking about the staff that were on duty that night. Well, how would anyone who wasn't on duty know that you had baby H? It was commented on by the day staff. Why would the day staff be interested that you had baby H? The day staff allocate who's looking after which patients. So because they don't want you to have baby H, they allocate you baby H. It wasn't a don't want, it was a comment that potentially other people needed the experience more than Shelley and I did. Right, let's look at this. So this is kind of typical thing. You see this with Dr. Evans as well. They just spend ages there raising a point, and Lucy's completely disproved what he said. So he'll now just drop that and just described it as shit slinging. And when I say that, I'm sure it's a very common prosecution technique. I'm sure this happens in court cases all the time. I don't think there's necessarily anything extraordinary or even unusual about this, but this is just how prosecution takes place. They just say, what about this? Well, that's all complete rubbish. Never mind. What about this? That's all complete. What about this? And that's what they do. Like I've often mentioned this court case where someone was convicted of spying for Russia, and they got his ex-girlfriend on the stand, and she said that he really liked James Bond films. Obviously, it's complete rubbish. It has nothing to do with the court case. Nothing to do with the allegations. There are millions of people that like James Bond films. It might not even be true. And this is the kind of thing that they do. Prosecutors do with some frequency. Whether Nick Johnson was better or worse than most, I'm not really sure. I know a lot of people feel very strongly about this, and I suppose that I'm one of them, but I also don't know for sure whether he's actually worse than typically occurs in court. But they use this technique of just saying, what about this argument? What about this argument? What about this argument? And that was really abused in this trial that went on for so long. So then he goes, right, let's look at this. Who of the nurses on needed the experience more than you or Shelley? I'm not saying that it happened on this shift here, but you are. You said it was all to do with baby H. Yes, but not this specific shift and time. Are you now trying to avoid answering the question when I ask you for particulars of an answer that you gave earlier in answer to your counsel? No. Because you're lying about that, aren't you? No. Were people talking about you being associated to the collapses of lots of children at different times? No, not at all. Is that the negative comments that you're talking about at tile 309? No. Were people starting to notice that you were associated to lots of different collapses? No. Can we go back to your defence statement, please? So before we go any further, let's just remind ourselves. So Lucy's given all these answers here. Were people starting to notice you're associated to lots of different collapses? We know for a fact that's true because there's the thorough inquiry statements from every nurse that worked on the unit and they all corroborate what Lucy said there. So we know for a fact that what Lucy said there is true. Let's continue. Can we go back to your defence statement, please? Paragraph 97. I did nothing to harm baby H. I have little recollection of matters relating to baby H outside of what is recorded on the medical notes. I do recall that she was not sedated and she moved a lot. Is that right? Yes. Is that an explanation for why her drains might move? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that I recall that she did used to move around. Yes. Yes, but we can all see that's what you say. What I'm interested in, and what I would be very much obliged if you would answer, is the reason why you put that in this document. That potentially, yes, she could have dislodged one of the drains. Why not just agree when I ask you the question the first time? Okay, so I mean, I'm sure some of you will cringe a bit at that. It does seem overly rude, but obviously this is what prosecutors do. I'd never seen a chest drain on a baby at the cancer chester before baby H, and I've never seen 3 chest drains on a baby at the same time. I'm not sure how familiar all the staff were at the cancer chester with chest drains. Fluid came from the chest drains for the whole of her time at the cancer chester neonatal unit. The drains were only taped in place, so they were not as secure as if they had been sutured. That's the same point, isn't it? Yes. I question how familiar doctors were with the use of chest drains. What grounds did you have for questioning how familiar the doctors were with chest drains? There was often discussion amongst the doctors about how to manage drains, and they often sought advice from the consultants about the drains. So let's just emphasise again here. What we're seeing unfold here is something that's happened from day one of the police interviews, and then it's been passed straight into the court case. Lucy has to explain everything that happened on this unit. Now, to some extent, that is a weakness of the defence case, where they failed to put experts in court, and so on and so forth. However, as we know the police did this as well, we're seeing the same strategy used again. Of course, it's not reasonable for Lucy to be able to explain everything. However, on this occasion, everything she says is completely correct. And top drawer clinical experts that have looked at the notes have concluded that she's correct. So it's absolutely right that she's exonerated on this case, but remember, things that she said about other infants were also correct, and she was convicted on those cases. So move on to the next part. Right. So by doctors, you're referring to non-consultants. Yes, and they would ask advice from their senior colleagues, yes. Registrars and house officers regularly ask advice from their senior for guidance from their senior colleagues, don't they? Not in how to conduct a procedure, no. Dr. Harkness had to receive advice over the phone from Dr. Gibbs when fitting the chest drain, yes. So that's the first of the chest drains, isn't it? The first of the 3. I'm not sure specifically which drain. We know Dr. Jairam will come to it, but I think Dr. Jairam inserted the second chest drain. Do you remember? I can't remember who inserted which drain now off the top of my head. No. Do you see count 10 is an allegation of attempted murder on the 26th of September? Yes. So just keep that open, but go back to your defence statement, please. Paragraph 101, count 10. Okay, have you got that? Yes. This is an allegation of attempted murder in the early hours of the 26th of September. Yes. Your paragraph 101 says, I don't recall any specific episode of desaturation during the night shift of the 25th to the 26th of September. Yes. Then count 11 is a very similar allegation of attempted murder, albeit it's on the next night shift, so this is the 27th of September. Yes. These are 2 night shifts, consecutive night shifts that you were working. Yes. And so far as count 11 is concerned, what you say is this. I do recall that on the 26th to the 27th of September, baby H deteriorated rapidly. I was with nurse A. Do you agree? Yes. Then you say as further detail, in my memory both nights merge into one. I cannot be specific about what I did during either of the collapses. However, on the 26th to the 27th of September, and this is count 11, I was looking after another severely disabled baby and my focus would have been on him. I may have signed for some medication for child H, but I did not administer this. Is that correct? Yes. So is that what the document says? Yes. And is it a correct reflection of what you say about this? No, because I now know looking at the paperwork that the baby was born later into the shift. Right, so the severely disabled baby that you were talking about was born later. Yes. Okay, off the top of your head, do you know the baby's initials? Yes. Would you tell them to us? LO. LO. Then at paragraph 104, I do not recall that any discoloration to baby H was the same as that on other babies. Yes. Then 105, I do not think baby H was given surfactant at birth, although she should have been. Yes. Is that right? Yes. So with regard to this surfactant assertion, this isn't something that is mentioned by the panel in their preview report. I should say that it could conceivably be in the full report. There's no way for me to know this. But the theme that Lucy recognises is discussed here. The infant had respiratory distress from birth, but was not given CPAP until 4 hours later. So they recognise issues with respiration, and they recognise a mistake, and they recognise poor treatment. And not only that, but this is very significant, because without the treatment, the infant grunts to exert chest pressure in an effort to keep the small air spaces in the lung open. This can lead to pneumothorax. So it's this typical thing of one error turns into another error, and that compounds, and then it amplifies and escalates. This tension pneumothorax is life-threatening and should be drained, and then they failed to drain it properly. So it's just one error after another on this unit. This is a straightforward thing to diagnose. What Dr. Evans has said in relation to this case, as I say, is just total rubbish. So then we continue. Now, other than the reference to LO and to your mistake, is there anything else in that material that I've just read out to you with which you now disagree? No. So you can imagine what he's now going to do is try and nitpick over some impossibly small detail that no one could reasonably be expected to remember. Of course, Lucy is not strongly involved with this infant. And this is a theme, again, that we see throughout the trial. This just, oh, look, we've come up with some... Often as well, the things they bring up are not even true. So that makes it even more difficult for us to remember them. But they'll pick up some incredibly obscure details from these things that occurred 6-7 years previously, and then say, oh, look at this, Lucy Letby, you said this, but actually this happened. You said the wallpaper was green, but actually it was more like aquamarine. Does that mean you're a liar? It's that kind of crap. So that's what we're going to see in this case. Let's examine the occasions one by one, if we may, please. So far as count 10 is concerned, baby H's desaturation and cardiac arrest in the early hours of the 26th of September 2015. Are you suggesting that staffing levels caused or contributed to that event? No. Are you suggesting that medical competence or incompetence contributed to it? I'm not sure of the exact details of this date. All right, what about anybody's mistakes? I question whether some of the drains were securely put in. So it's absolutely correct. She's absolutely correct to say that. Okay, so an issue about the security of the drains. Yes. You didn't deliberately misplace the drains, I don't suppose, did you? No. If they became displaced, you say that's down to the fault of somebody who fixed them. No, potentially it is, yes. I've only ever seen them stitched in. I've never seen them just stuck down with tape. So, another thing to mention here is that, Johnson's just trying to throw in this idea that Lucy's done something wrong with the drains. I mean, that's not really even part of the allegations. This is another case in which this is an air embolism case rather than air down the nasogastric tube. So, Dr. Evans didn't really even cite the drains as being the reason for collapse. But let's continue. Do you agree that baby H was born in good condition? I can't comment on that right now without seeing. All right, we'll help you. Tile 5, please. It says there, this is the note of Dr. Matthew Neame. It says born in good condition. Yes. Do you dispute that? No. After all these events, or the 2 events in particular with which you are charged, do you dispute that baby H, her condition, improved dramatically once she got out the cancer Chester? No, her condition did improve. Right. Well, the reason for that is because when they left the cancer Chester, all of these mistakes stopped happening. It's really nothing to do with Lucy whatsoever. So Johnson continues. Right, I'll just remind you of some of the chronology like Mr. Myers did. It's a slight repetition, but it may help you. The first chest drain was inserted on the 24th of September by Dr. Harkness at about 1000 hours. Okay. That was to deal with a tension pneumothorax. So remember at the start, this is the one mention. We've got 47 pages. Very unlikely we're going to get through all those 47 pages. This is the only time that Johnson mentions a pneumothorax, which is the reason the infant collapsed. So we're going to hear now 38 pages of complete bullshit that have nothing to do with why this infant collapsed, that have nothing to do with the clinical signs of the infant. All that is going to be ignored so he can create an absolutely ridiculous narrative around this infant. And I think the only reason that Lucy's not convicted on this case and has been convicted on other cases is because it was admitted that there was suboptimal care with regard to this infant. But that should have been conceded across the entire court case because there are multiple mistakes across all of these babies. Not just one, not just two, multiple. Every single time they made multiple errors. There were often errors of diagnosis, errors of treatment, errors of medical procedures across everyone. That's true of child H, but that's no different to the other infants in the case. If the court and the jury had heard the truth across all of these cases, then Lucy Letby wouldn't have gone to prison. In fact, if all of this stuff wasn't brought up in the first place and a competent job had been done in the original assessment of case notes, then the case would never have gone anywhere near a court. That's very clear now. It's obvious. So let's continue. The night shift of the 24th into the 25th, you were baby H's designated nurse, weren't you? I take your word for that. I can't say from memory now. Tile 40 of the sequence. Here we see that you were the designated nurse on this shift. We see your retrospective nursing notes written at 8:21 on the morning of Friday the 2nd. Yes, thank you. That's why I'm suggesting that you were baby H's designated nurse. Yes, I accept that. Thank you. Just to remind you, it was on this shift at 1:45 that your friend, Dr. Ventras, inserted a butterfly needle. Do you remember that? Yes. Dr. Verghese intubated baby H at 2:45. Okay. And Dr. J. Ram at about 3 o'clock inserted a second chest drain into the 7th intercostal space. Okay. Do you remember that? And there was quite a lot of evidence about whether or not that was an appropriate place to put a chest drain. Yes. That it was not a pigtail chest drain, it was a more old-fashioned version of a chest drain. That's right, yes. Okay, so that just puts it into context. I'm going to move on now to ask you about what happened on the following night shift of the 25th into the 26th. I can start from the beginning tomorrow, my lord, or deal with a few preliminary questions now in the remaining 2 minutes. No, I think we'll do it of one piece tomorrow just for the sake of a few minutes, so we'll come back to that tomorrow. The court adjourned and Lucy would travel back across the Pennines to be incarcerated in prison. Then they got her up the next day at 5 o'clock. She travelled back over the Pennines. They put her in court and then were resumed on the Thursday the 25th of May 2023. Overnight, have you thought of anything that you have previously said that you would like to amend or add extra detail to? Can you imagine the horror of this? I've discussed this previously and I'll probably discuss it again in the future, but can you just imagine what it's like to go through something like this? It must be. I don't think there are words that can possibly describe it. You know, you're there in court being attacked by this barrister, then they basically handcuff you, I would assume, stick you in a police van, drive you halfway across the country, stick you back in prison, you're in solitary confinement, And the first thing he says, "Oh, overnight, have you thought of anything you'd like to say?" I mean, what can you say about it? What can you say? It's just horrendous, utterly horrendous. So she says, "The only thing you asked me yesterday if the datex had been completed about the chest drains, and I can confirm it was done. Right, and that's by you. Yes. And you remember doing that, do you? Sorry, you remember doing that. I have seen the datex on the system. Right. We had got to count 10, which I can see from here is still open on the desk in front of you. I don't know whether the jury have it. It's behind divider 1 in jury bundle 1. This is an allegation of attempted murder on the 26th of September 2015. You were, of course, on duty on the night shift of the 25th into the 26th, weren't you? Yes. I was asking you whether the staffing levels had in any way, in your view, contributed to baby H's collapse on this shift. No. No, so completely irrelevant. This is nothing to do with why this infant collapsed. The infant collapsed because of the pneumothorax and poor management. Simple as that. The staffing levels, Lucy's movements are irrelevant, and really the only relevant things are the clinical signs of the infant and the medical treatment of those clinical. I mean, you can hardly even describe it as clinical signs here. Being generous to describe it as clinical signs. Dr. Evans said there was a pneumothorax. Everyone knows there's a pneumothorax. It's not debated in any way. It's just that Dr. Evans decided to say, "Oh, I don't think the pneumothorax was significant. I think air was the reason this infant collapsed." And of course, anyone looking at these clinical notes with any qualifications is going to absolutely trash that opinion. So, of course, the prosecution's got to come up with all this bullshit. You notice there's been nothing of any substance. We're on page 10 already. There's just absolutely nothing so far. And they're going to try to weave this kind of pathetic web of nonsense so that they can say, "Oh, look, Lucy Letby, you lied, and it was your constant presence. And we've seen the shift chart. It's got, because there is no medical evidence, there is no scientific evidence for any of these cases." So the second question here that Johnson asks is whether somebody's medical incompetence had contributed in any way to the collapse of baby H. Yes, I think potentially with the management of her chest drains, yes. And by management, what do you mean? The insertion of them and how they were secured. What is it about the insertion of them that you suggest was deficient? I'm not saying it was deficient, but I think it has been accepted that there were issues with the drains throughout the trial. It's come to light. That's not the question. The question, if you wouldn't mind, is what are you suggesting it was about the management, the insertion to use, that they may not have been correct because there was a lot of discussion needed on how to insert the drains. Does it come to this then, because you are saying there was a lot of discussion amongst the doctors about inserting the drains, that means that there is a problem with the drainage? Potentially, yes. So that I can understand. We can all understand what you are suggesting. What are you suggesting was the problem? That potentially baby H's pneumothoraces were not treated appropriately. Right, and that is because of what? Lack of experience in using multiple drains of different types that nobody seemed particularly confident to use. Which particular doctor or doctors are you suggesting lacked the experience required? Multiple doctors. Well, yes, but Dr. Hartness, Dr. Jerram, Dr. Gibbs, Dr. Ventris even, yes. So, basically, he's trying to set it up. So he's trying to say, "Oh, look at this horrible nurse blaming all these wonderful doctors. We always put doctors on a pedestal, and no doctor would ever do anything wrong, etc., etc." So that was a very, very similar technique that was used in the retrial of Child K. Now, absolutely everything that Lucy said there is correct. Not only is everything that she said correct, but actually that's downplaying the degree of medical mismanagement here. All of the issues that Child H experienced were related to misdiagnosis and medical mismanagement and medical errors on the unit. This is all completely avoidable, very easily avoidable, and it's also very easy for someone qualified to be able to look at the notes and to easily determine what has occurred to this infant. It's not in any way challenging. And yet, somehow, we see this extraordinary process in court. At least, as I've said, at least we can say for this infant that this infant isn't one for which Lucy's facing a life sentence. I suppose that's something. But it kind of contributed to other infants in the case because it just makes it look again as if, oh, this is just yet another incident that Lucy's around for, and this time she's the designated nurse. So, although Lucy wasn't convicted on this case, it's still important. And it's still important to understand what happened. Now, can we go back to Child 27, please? This is something that you dealt with in answer two questions from your own counsel some time ago now. We can see that it's dated a couple of days earlier on the 24th of September at 9:15. Yes, just so that we can understand the connection or the relevance or potential relevance of this text sent to your friend Nurse E. Are you suggesting there was anything unsafe going on in the unit on the shift that we are dealing with now? In other words, the shift that began that on the 25th into the 26th of September. No, this is referring to a different time. So there's some talk about what's happening on the unit on the 25th, 26th of September. Lucy goes, no, this is referring to a different time. So it's not relevant, is that right, to baby H's collapse? No, because she was one-to-one nursed at that point. Yes, now a short time ago when I was asking you about your friend Nurse A, and I was making the point with you that she was truly supernumerary. Now I must confess I'd never seen this word before. I don't know if it's used commonly in legal proceedings, but it just means to exceed the expected number of something, basically. You suggested that she was in some way responsible for helping you with child H. Yes. What are you suggesting about her function on? That's the role of a supernumerary shift leader, is to support staff on the unit with medications and anything that would need to be done, and particularly with baby H. I was unfamiliar with chest drains, and Nurse A played a part in assisting me with baby H's care. So the supernumerary shift leader is just like an extra person, basically. Right, did you not have experience of chest drains? Not a lot of experience, no. I thought you said you dealt with them at Liverpool. I have, yes, but I've not had a lot of experience with them at the Council of Chester, no. So you see, like, they just tries to suggest that she's being disingenuous or lying. So this is all entirely reasonable. She said, I've not had a lot of experience. So then he says, I thought you dealt with them at Liverpool. So there's a difference between not a lot of experience and no experience. If she hadn't dealt with them at Liverpool, she could say, I've had no experience, but you could deal with something once, but that doesn't mean you've had a lot of experience. So it's just kind of pathetic semantics, in my view. Obviously, what she's saying is true, again. And as she rightly says, she's not had a chest drain at the Council of Chester at all. Did you suggest to anybody at the beginning of this particular shift that in some way your knowledge or experience was deficient? No, I don't think it was deficient. I think it was raised that I didn't have a lot of experience, and part of that was that Nurse A was supernumerary and would be able to assist me. And what are the tasks with which she was assisting you? Well, I can't recall specifically now, but it would have been medications, and I know when she had further chest drains put in, Nurse A helped me with the insertion and setting up of those drains with me. Right, let's deal with those two issues then. Medication she'd have to co-sign with you. Somebody would have had to co-sign medication with me, yes. And that would be true of any child, wouldn't it? Yes. So there's nothing exceptional about baby H in that respect, no. So far as the insertion of a chest drain was concerned, which particular chest drain are you suggesting she assisted you with? The drain that was inserted on the night of the 26th. Yes, this is Dr. Gibbs' chest drain, is that right? Yes. So this was at 2:15, is that right? Yes, I don't know the time right now, but I think there are two times in the documents. One is 2:10, one is 2:15 in the early hours of the 26th. So they go on and on about the times. I'm not going to read all of that. Does it come to this, that so far as the assistance you were getting from Nurse A was concerned, that was limited to co-signing for medications? I can't say without reviewing the charts. Well, have you looked? You clearly looked at the charts last night because you raised an issue when I asked you to clarify anything you've already said. Yes, have you looked at the charts overnight? Yes, but I can't remember every detail, and I think it would be unrealistic if I could remember every single detail. Well, you said in answer to your own counsel that you gave the impression that she was in nursery 1 with you, helping you with baby H all the time. I did not say she was there at all times, no. What are you saying so we understand? That Nurse A was supernumerary and that she did help me throughout the evening. I can't be specific at what time or what she actually did at certain times, but she was with me on and off throughout the shift. And that would all be documented on the charts, wouldn't it? Not all of it, no. Well, that sort of thing wouldn't. If she's with me to give verbal advice, or if she's helping me to do something that I've then signed for on the chart, it would not necessarily have her signature. But she gave me a lot of verbal advice that night. About what? About the management of baby H. In particular, in what respect? In management of her chest drains. And then when she collapsed, it was information about baptism and things like that. For the time being, let's concentrate on what caused baby H's collapse. All right, okay. Do you remember that baby H collapsed in the early hours of the 26th? I don't recall specific details. I know she did collapse, yes. Do you remember hearing the evidence of baby H's father? Not in detail, no. Well, it was read to the jury by agreement on the 18th of January this year. And of course, this is a statement that you have had available to you for a couple of years now, isn't it? Yes. What father of baby H said, and I'm going to read you directly from his statement, all right. Okay, he was talking about his daughter, and he said she was in an incubator and was on CPAP to help her breathe. So we spent time in there from Tuesday onwards and on the Friday. And we're talking about a Friday, aren't we? The 25th of September. Yes. On the Friday, I'd been there late with the mother of baby H's mum. So that's his mother-in-law. I'd been there late with the mother-in-law until about midnight, and we'd come back to the house, and I was awoken by her in the early hours. Okay? Okay, so that's the father of baby H's agreed evidence that on this shift, for which we saw the population distribution at tile 177, he was there until just about midnight or thereabouts. So all this is going on and on and on, so that they can say eventually, oh look, this is when you were alone, Lucy Letby, and this is when you did this. Conversely, in actual reality, this is what occurred with child H. So you can see this discussion in court that medical notes by a doctor showed a reaccumulation of her left-sided pneumothorax. A further chest drain was inserted to relieve the pressure. The intensive care unit chart shows that Letby recorded having given child H a dose of morphine at 1:25 a.m. and a dose of saline at 2:50 a.m. And then at 3:22 a.m. child H collapsed and required CPR. The attending doctor said the cause was unclear because all the way through this they misdiagnosed things and they failed to recognise their own mistakes. Then later on, Dr. John Gibbs records this as being about 2:15 a.m. when there's an oxygen and blood gas issue, and the chest X-ray shows a reaccumulation of child H's left-sided pneumothorax, i.e. a collapsed lung. At this point they inserted the third chest drain to relieve the pressure. Then Dr. Alison Ventris talks about aspirating the pneumothorax, and this is the first time that she'd done it. Now, this is no criticism of her, but it wouldn't be particularly surprising if this wasn't done to the best level possible, and it's clear that there were medical mistakes with regard to this infant. And then it's noted here that Dr. Ventris performed this emergency pneumothorax aspiration due to the profound desaturation of child A. Then it continues. Dr. Ventris again suspected a pneumothorax later on after the ventilation of child H had to be increased. Now, I can't comment on whether it was the correct decision to increase ventilation. We know they made lots of ventilation mistakes in other cases. Then there was another emergency pneumothorax aspiration due to another desaturation and fall in oxygen levels. Then I think it's just a repetition of Dr. Ventris suspecting a pneumothorax again and calling a consultant. This is in cross-examination. They agree child H had been suffering for a prolonged period of time from tension pneumothorax. The reality is she had been through an awful lot of medical activity. And this is from very early on. They go on to question JRAM extensively about the pneumothorax, and it's conceded that there were numerous procedures required to drain air from the chest due to suffering with this collapsed lung. And we see an extensive cross-examination of Lucy Letby. It goes on and on and on. You can see here there's kind of ridiculous questions about what's written in the box, all of the writing. You interpret whether you do them individually as different boxes or as a unit. The totality of that material, I can't see without looking at the columns. I'm assuming it's clear either orally or I can't see the column it represents, but there's small blood stained, and then beneath that it says clear, and it goes on, all these stupid questions. Here he's saying, you are creating, I suggest, in the handwritten documentation, the impression that child H was deteriorating in the lead up to a more serious crash. No. So all of these allegations, there is a specific allegation here that I've put on the screen now. All of these allegations of falsified notes are all just completely fabricated. There's no evidence to support this. There's no evidence in this case. There's no medical evidence. There's no physical evidence. No one witnessed this. There is no support for these claims whatsoever. And this is all set up so that Johnson can go through the coup de grace at the end of this cross-examination of Lucy Letby, which we'll go over now. So Johnson begins this final section by saying, so this is the evidence of the father of baby H again, the agreed evidence. What he said to the jury through his statement was this, talking about his daughter. She was okay during the Saturday day, and then quite late on I remember going to the parents' bedroom on the ward to get some sleep. It was only shortly afterwards that we got a knock on the door to say she had deteriorated and she needed medical attention, and for us to go and be with her at her bedside. Okay, yes. So yet again with baby H, a second incident happening just after the parents had left, or the parent in this case, yes. Father of baby H leaving gave you the opportunity to sabotage baby H, didn't it? No. So again, this is a completely unevidenced claim. There's just no evidence for this whatsoever. Just as in the cases of baby B, baby C, baby E, and we will see baby I, baby N, baby M, and babies O, P, and R. So interesting that they mention baby R, seeing as it's not on the indictment, so I'm not really even sure what that's referencing, I must be honest. All cases where the children deteriorated shortly after their parents leave. Is that something you identified as an opportunity to attack these children? No, I've never attacked any child. So I think in the case, this must be child Q, surely, and this is just a transcription error. I can't think of any other possible explanation. But yeah, so just trying to use... We've seen this... When I've been going over his closing statement, he tries to bundle things together and use coincidences and all on very tenuous evidential claims. In this particular instance, there's no evidence at all. Were you covering for Shelley Tomlins? You said you might have been on a break, but were you covering for Shelley at 1 a.m? I couldn't say. There's no way from memory that I would know. Well, if we go to tile 425, please, just look at the observation chart there. This is the Saturday into the Sunday, the 26th into the 27th. If we look, we can see that baby H was on hourly observations, wasn't she? Yes. But there's no hourly observations at 100 hours, are there? No. And we know the precise time of the crash call because if we go to tiles 438 and 439, please, we can see that if we can click on them just to remind ourselves, 438 was the call onto the consultant's Dr. Saladin at 104. The next one, tiled 439 at 106, was for the senior house officer. Yes, this shows us, doesn't it, what time the emergency occurred? Yes. And again, Dr. Neem, I'm suggesting, told us that when he arrived, the person he remembered as being there was you. Do you remember that? I remember that, yes. Was he telling the truth? I don't recall that being the case. Were you there at that time? That's the question. I can't say from memory. He said he was concerned about this because it wasn't completely clear why baby H had collapsed. You were there, weren't you? I can't say from memory exactly what I was doing when. Well, you've made an entry, as a matter of fact, if you look at the neonatal review at line 121 in the chart of the child EM. Yes, and that was to give yourself an alibi, wasn't it, for your interference with baby H? No, that's me giving care to the baby that I was allocated. Not an unreasonable response. Do you remember baby H having CPR and being given adrenaline again? Yes. Do you remember later, at 3:30 again, baby H required neopuffing? I can't recall specific times, no. So at some point, just to mention, I will make a standalone video in which I look at every instance, the prosecution accusing Lucy of fabricating records and so forth, because there isn't actually any evidence to underpin any of these allegations whatsoever. It's just I haven't had time to do that, and it takes a long time to put that together. But there is no... This is something that's repeated after the trial, that Lucy falsified records, but in actual fact, there's absolutely no evidence to support that whatsoever. It's a complete fabrication, ironically, from the prosecution. Let's go to tile 471, please. This is Shelley Tomlin's note of this event. Can you see where it says addendum about a third of the way down? So this is written at 3:49. Do you see? Yes. This concerns an event which, if her times are correct, happened 19 minutes earlier. Do you see that? Yes. It says 330 profound desaturations to 60s, again requiring neopuffing with no known cause for desaturation, air entry still heard bilaterally. So that means, doesn't it, air is going in and out of the lungs? Yes. Capnography positive, or capnography, I should say, positive, which means the gas exchange is happening. Yes. CO2 is coming out. Then copious amounts of secretions which were pink tinged. Yes. Had you interfered with baby H's endotracheal tube again? No. But again, if we go back to the neonatal review at page 8 of 11, you were back in nursery 1 again, weren't you? When, sorry? Just after this incident with Shelley Tomlin's records as being a 1, I think it was 3:30, wasn't it? Yes. I'm helping Shelley after that, yes. The supernumerary on this shift was Christopher Booth, wasn't he? He was the shift leader, yes. I don't think he was supernumerary. Well, he had one child in nursery 2, didn't he? Yes. Which is where you were, yes. Why is it always you that ends up back in nursery 1 when something happens? I don't agree that it's always me. You tried to kill baby H twice, didn't you? No. So, as you can see, this is just all complete tripe. There's absolutely no substance underpinning anything that Johnson is saying. And also, just to reiterate, he's completely ignored the pneumothorax in these 47 pages. It's all just nonsense of going through notes and saying, oh, this person came into this room, that person came to that room, or then you falsified this record, then you've done this, then you've done that, or why are you lying about this, Lucy Letby? Oh, we've had the shift chart, haven't we? We've seen the shift chart. It's always used on duty, isn't it? And what I want to emphasise again is that this isn't worse than the other cases. It's just that poor care was conceded in relation to this case, and we'll never know why the jury didn't find her guilty on this case, but it's no better or worse than any of the other infants in the court case. So in summary, this infant collapsed despite not being particularly premature. Child H was born at 34 weeks, which is considered premature, but not dangerously so. The infant was much larger in birth weight than many of the other infants in the case, at 2.33 kilograms. In fact, only child D of the indictment infants was heavier at birth, which was largely irrelevant in the case of child D, considering the other issues that this infant experienced. You could quite reasonably say that child H was the healthiest infant at birth of all the cases in the indictment, but still collapsed. It can therefore be reasonably stated that child H was not an infant that would have been reasonably expected to collapse if managed well. The one issue that child H experienced was a pneumothorax, which occurred due to highly suboptimal management of respiratory issues. Had these respiratory issues been managed adequately, this infant would not have collapsed. This infant is particularly illustrative for two reasons. Firstly, it demonstrates that infants could and did collapse on this unit when not even significantly premature, low birth weight, or unwell. Secondly, the medical mismanagement of this infant, coupled with avoidable errors, was chronically poor. Even her parents openly stated that child H received far superior care when she was transferred to Arrow Park Hospital, where she recovered. The prosecution was able to come up with no plausible method of inflicted harm. The prosecution completely ignored the utterly undeniable clinical picture of this infant. The prosecution concocted an entirely spurious narrative around Lucy's actions to explain the collapses of this infant, which was simply completely lacking in logic and evidential support. Despite this, and despite the fact that Lucy was not convicted in relation to child H, the cross-examination of Lucy Letby is not noticeably worse or even different in themes and style from any other infant in the case. All I can finally say, in conclusion, to child H and the cross-examination of Lucy Letby is that it was total, complete and utter rubbish. There is nothing more that I can say other than that.